Mine's is working well, so I can't say what's going on with the other thing. So can we get started? And just how's everyone doing? My name is Alexander Anderson. I'm the moderator of this workshop, and it's on language. And so let's get started. I have some people sent me some questions. So I want to open up and just say a few things about the importance of language. And what this workshop is about. So the question that was forwarded to me, one of the first questions by Denise Camp, which I think is a good question to open up what we're talking about, is how can language affect persons being addressed? And I want to just start out with reading from a letter that was sent by a good friend of mine and a mentor and someone that I looked up to very well, and his name is Eddie Ellis, and he wrote, "We habitually underestimate the power of language. The Bible says death and life are in the power of the tongue. In fact, all of the faith traditions recognize the power of words, and in particular names that we are given or gives ourselves. Ancient traditions consider naming ceremonies one of the most important rites of passage. Our name indicates not only who you were or where you belong, but also who you could be. The worst part of repeatedly hearing your negative definitions of me is that I begin to believe it myself. For as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. It follows then that calling me inmate, convict, prison, felon, or offender indicates a lack of understanding of who I am, but more importantly, what I can be. I can be, am much more than an ex-con or ex-offender or ex-felon or ex-da-da-da-da-da. And we can go on and on and on about all the things that we are more than what we are being called. What does all this add up to? And I just want to say this, and then I'll open it up for comments. Leading people with people first language is the start of healing. And let me repeat that. Leading with people first language is the start of healings, because I believe we are fighting ultimately against something much more serious, and that is a disease that affects all of us, and that disease is dehumanization. Dehumanization doesn't just touch people who are stigmatized or the oppressed. It affects all of us. The disease of dehumanization, we see it all the time. It's the inability to perceive others as human beings. When it takes root, it allows for all manners of violence and degradation. And some of the videos that Bruce, who's having some technical difficulty, some of the videos that Bruce has created and designed are designed to help all of us alike see and experience our shared humanity, and then feel an obligation to fight on behalf of its collective restoration. So, in other words, the disease of dehumanization is how I believe that is what is affecting our nation today. As you turn on your televisions or listen to news or read any news articles, we'll see the type of violence and the type of degradation that's going on in our society repeatedly. And as a social worker, right, I understand the whole idea of the DSM-4 that seems to categorize diseases, right? But you don't see the disease of dehumanization, the inability of some of the people sometimes not being able to see and feel and empathize with other human beings, to me, is the problem that we're ultimately facing. Now, I would like to open up for comments and other people's input on this.
Hey, thanks very much. My name's Denise Camp. I am from an organization called On Our Own of Maryland, and we are an education and advocacy organization for people living with mental health and substance use issues. And the importance of person first language, and my pronouns are she and her, is important because it's important to see the person and not an illness, a diagnosis, or a label, but to be able to see the person. So, when you label someone a convict or an ex-offender or that crazy person or that, drug addict, you're not seeing the human being. And again, like Alexander said, you're dehumanizing the person. And part of the issue in our society now is that dehumanization, especially when we're not connected like we used to be pre-pandemic era. One of the programs that On Our Own of Maryland offers is called Distorted Perceptions, and you can visit us at distortedperceptions.org, where we ask you to look at us as people and not our label or diagnosis. Jessica?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica. I work at HIPS, which is an organization based in DC that works with drug users, sex workers, and individuals experiencing homelessness. While we're talking about language, something that I notice a lot is people refer to people experiencing homelessness as the homeless or homeless people. And the thing is that no one is a homeless person, right? Like that's an experience. And I think that when we're talking about language, it's so important to remember that, like for my clients, for example, I don't attribute homelessness, drug use, HIV to their activities or what they do. I just meet them where they're at and try to get them to wherever they want to be, wherever that is, in a healthy manner. And language is an important part of that. As a person living with HIV, I have experienced a lot of stigma on, living with HIV. I've been called all sorts of things that I won't repeat here in case it's triggering for people. But, we can all work together to be kinder to individuals. And to be honest, most of the clients that I work with that are drug users, most of them just want a hug and someone to talk to, and so many people are quick to label those folks as addicts, but they're not addicts. They're people who are struggling with addiction. And, even if their choices lead to them getting some disease or something, we don't judge them for whatever they've been through. We just want to help them with whatever they've been through to get them to where they need to be. So if you want to know more about HIPS, again, we're based in DC, www.hips.org. I don't know if Bruce wants to go.
Bruce, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but we can't see you.
Yeah, my video, I don't understand what's going on with this. I am definitely computer literate. I don't know much about it. I don't mess with these laptops, and I just, somebody lent it to me and I'm here, but you can hear me. I'm sorry I couldn't get video. But I work for a program called Ritual for Return. Ritual for Return, it's a reentry, it's a rites of passage reentry based program. What we do is we deal with individuals that are permanently or has been previously, well, not permanently, who is previously incarcerated or who has been incarcerated. What we do is we remove stigma from these individual lives. It's a unique program. It's one of a kind. You won't find a program like this out there. I'm a graduate of Ritual for Return. I'm also a co-founder. the labels that we endure as myself are, as some people of society has put on us, on me, it's the word convict, drug addict, what else can I say? Crazy. I have endured, I've made some mistakes in my life, but unfortunately some people of society has kept this label on me. So when I go out and get a job or go somewhere to actually, get something to better myself, I'm looked at as, well, you're a convict, or, well, because you take medication, you're crazy, because you have a past substance abuse history, you're a drug addict. I remember I've created videos about stigma and how it can damage one emotionally. This has affected me. It has stopped me from moving forward. There were times where I wanted to become a peer specialist, and I got discouraged because I couldn't become a peer specialist because I was looked at as a convict. When I joined With You for Return, they opened that door for me. They made it possible for me, to become a peer specialist, to become a rites of passage artist, to become a co-founder. I was able to do my rites of passage, and our rites of passage, we have like not a criteria, but we have it to where we have, you come into the program, you'll do a mask making. These mask makings are done with strips. The strips are placed on your head. Each strip represents a label, right? And it forms a nasty mask. We have a river of life to where one individual can express his upbringing from where he's come from to where he is now. We have a monologue to where the individual can express himself through poem, through writing, through acting. We put all three of these together, and it forms a rites of passage, and the individual has the opportunity to act that out. And that's what I did as a graduate. So I think With You for Return is a very unique program. We believe in restoration. We do not believe in labels. We do not believe that we are what some people of society says we are. I'm no longer a convict. I would not allow you to call me that. I'm no longer a drug addict. I would not allow you to call me that. And by me entering With You for Return, it has helped me become a better person, a more open person, and willing to help other people who are going through the same thing that I'm going through.
Thank you so much for that, Bruce. I have a couple more questions, and let me and I would like to direct this question to Bruce, to you, or anyone else that's on the panel, and it is, why is using a person's desired pronouns so important?
I'm gonna take that just because I am a trans person. So let's say you have a patient or a client, right? Like I work in a clinic, right? And this patient comes in and they're seeking hormone therapy because that's one of the services we provide, or scratch hormone therapy. They're coming in for their Suboxone. We have a medication assisted therapy clinic, right? You have a young woman come in and she refers to herself as she, and you start labeling her as he. I mean, I gotta be honest with you. I know cis women that'll smack you upside the head. They don't even gotta be trans. So, I'm tired of all this nonsense where people say, like, why are pronouns so important for trans people? No, pronouns are important for everybody. Like, everybody wants to be respected. No woman wants to be called a man. So if you wouldn't look at your wife or your husband and refer to them as the other, as an insult, then understand that when you are doing that to trans people, that's the equivalent of you going to your wife and saying, you look like a man today. Good luck with that one,
And I want to be very transparent about it. Is that I'm accused of also you misusing people's pronouns and saying, derogatory things to people. And I think we all are at some point until we are corrected. So I think it's very important that we, even if someone doesn't know, it's important that we correct people and, and help people understand that. Another question that's Denise had sent. What do you say to someone who mislabels you? And I think that's a very important question. Denise, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, and I'm going to also invite Jessica and Brianna to comment on it too. When someone mislabels you, whether it's, gender, racial or ethnic identity, or referring to you as your diagnosis. I'm a person that lives with mental health issues. And, if someone's going to label me, that crazy chick, I'm going to politely correct them. Crazy is not a diagnosis in the DSM. And if someone says to me, I get it all the time on the phone, oh, Mr. Camp, no, excuse me, that's Miss Camp. And I specifically say Miss because I am an unmarried woman, so don't call me Mrs. Camp. And we can gently and correct people to let them know what we are feeling and how we prefer to be referred to, and to address me respectfully. We hope that people would do that. And stigma really is all about respect, and not getting that respect can cause that internal stigma that Bruce was talking about that makes us feel bad about ourselves. And we are empowering ourselves, like Jessica talks about, we're empowering ourselves to say, it's not okay to address me that way. Here is the way I prefer to be addressed, and respectfully address me that way. Jessica?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a quote that I'm actually working on a presentation surrounding this. And stigma is defined as a set of negative and often unfair beliefs that a society or group of people have about something. So when you think about that definition of like what stigma is, like the real issue with like not labeling trans people with their proper pronouns is that you're immediately stigmatizing them. And what's even worse, right, that Denise is talking about is that when you label someone with a label, whether it be convict, addict, or you mislabel a trans person, those people begin to internalize that stigma. So what internalized stigma looks like is trans people detransitioning because they don't feel like they're trans enough, meaning that they're actually quitting. They throw in the towel because they don't think that they'll ever be good enough like the people that are on Instagram or the people that are famous. Our society doesn't do a lot to fix that. That same stigma exists for women. We fat shame women every day in the media. We only exclusively show skinny, white, blonde hair, blue-eyed women most of the time. So, when you have that as your model, like even women begin to internalize stigma against themselves for seeing that on the media. So, linking this conversation back to HIV, because I think, that's a huge part of why we're here, like, seeing things on the media like you equals you, undetectable equals untransmittable, is dispelling that stigma for people living with HIV. I saw a comment, someone said like, if a doctor refers to you as a diabetic and they internalize like I am a diabetic with sugar, there's a thin line on that I want to address. So like, for example, like, referring to a trans person as the wrong pronouns is never okay. But like, I'm someone who lives with HIV. I prefer when people refer to me as undetectable, because that literally means that my HIV is managed. I like to think that when providers talk about HIV, the HIV that they're discussing is mismanaged HIV that can be spread to other individuals. So, and I only say mismanaged, not because the individual is not taking care of their HIV properly. I just say it's because the doctor or whoever that person's trying to access medical care is not giving them the proper care and they're not able to access their medication, whether it be because of racism, transphobia, other stigma. So when someone is not managing their virus properly, right, they can like spread HIV. So when I hear HIV, I think of like, HIV as something that can be spread. Like something that I like to refer to patients and clients as is I refer to them as undetectable. So if you're having an issue with like a diabetic patient who's like internalizing that stigma, you could refer to their glucose levels. You could be like, wow, look at that, your glucose levels are normal, instead of referring to their diabetes, which is relevant to their disease, right? So for me, for example, my doctor, never tells me your HIV is managed. She says, oh, you're still undetectable, which basically means like I'm taking my medication every day, I am safe, and I'm keeping the other ones safe around me. Undetectable has a much nicer connotation than someone with HIV. At that point, when you say someone with HIV, it kind of sounds like that person can give it to someone else. But when you refer to undetectable, which is the new thing, undetectable is untransmittable, you're literally labeling that person has HIV and we're safe. Like they're good. They take care of themselves. We're all good. And that to me sounds a little more lively and hopeful than labeling someone with a disease. So I don't know if that helps address that provider's question, but I like to think of neat workarounds, like your levels are good. That's something I love to say.
I'll jump in, and I'm sorry for being late. My name is Brianna Jenkins, pronouns she, her, hers. I am a labor and employment attorney in the DC area. And just kind of piggyback into the question of like why specifically why pronouns are important, and it kind of ties into everything that everybody has said on this call. Not only does it create an internal stigma, but I think, and everybody's alluded to this, it not acknowledging people's identities is linked to like systemic and institutional discrimination. So when we're not creating spaces to acknowledge more people, folks who are in the margins, LGBTQ folks, Black folks, other folks of color, it's more than just not respecting somebody or not. From the specific examples that were given, when people are trying to access medical care, when people are trying to access housing, not creating space to recognize all of us and the diversity of our humanity, it shuts us out from these institutions and these systems, and it creates like this vicious cycle for further discrimination and for further marginalization. So it's important that we recognize how diverse we are, like how diverse humanity is, and that we, it literally takes you nothing to respect somebody's pronouns, or to ask somebody what their pronouns are, or if you get it wrong, to say, I made a mistake. How can I correct this? But it's important to acknowledge the personal harm, but the personal harm are functioning within these systems, and we have to link it back to the systems, because if we create space for, then all of us can be free. And also, particularly with language is powerful. Reclaiming language is powerful. And I hate to bring politics into this, but there's power in language. It's power in how you frame things. We see the right and how they're able to rally up this fear through these words like anti-CRT and build the wall. Like, it's power in language, and we're seeing the downside of when you manipulate language and you leave certain things out. But going back to Jessica's point, it's power. It's power when you say I'm undetectable, because now we're in an age where we're able to use language to give humanity back to people that have not had the privilege to define their personhood and to define their humanity. So ultimately, we should allow ourselves to sit in the discomfort, but ultimately, we should be letting folks who have always been overlooked, who have always been shortchanged, to really define what feels best for them and to really follow their lead.
And to tack on to what Brianna said, I just want to address a question that Joe had in the chat about holding clinicians to this standard and how we can get them to be more person first, because she mentioned being labeled diabetic. And whenever that comes up for me, I correct the person. I'm a person first. I am a person living with diabetes, because if I had cancer, you wouldn't call me a canceric. You would say I'm a person with cancer. And so any of those physical issues that we're living with, even mental health, the disease of addiction, being able to see ourselves as persons first, allow us to advocate for ourselves and speak up for ourselves and demand that respect of being a person and not that label. Alexander?
Yeah, I'm just taking it all in, and I just want to share something that a couple of years ago, when I first became aware of the whole pronoun language situation, it was at a Thanksgiving dinner, and it was one of my relatives, a cousin of mine, that sat us, all the family, down, and while we were sitting together getting ready for dinner, she explained to us the importance of pronouns and how pronouns were affecting people. And some of the family members weren't getting it right away, but she took the time to explain it to us. And, you know, I was smart enough to always keep your mouth shut when you don't know something and you're learning something new. So I sat and I listened, and I thought it was so powerful, because as the years moved on, I started seeing how the pronouns were being used to help change people's lives and help change the power dynamics that was going on with pronouns. Like, there's a power dynamics to call yourself Mr. or call yourself Mrs. There's some power dynamics going on. And she, my cousin, explained to us and very, very articulately the importance of us recognizing, you know, that the changes that were happening. And I think that's, you know, I bring that up right now is because we're getting ready to have another family gathering. And I've said to myself, you know, that's an important time to share, you know, information that we get in this struggle, like, as things are changing, like narratives are changing things so rapidly and so powerfully, right? That, you know, we need to share that information with our family members, because oftentimes we find stigma from family members. We find it very ingrained. And I just want to share one more example. When I came out of prison in 1986, I came out with my high school diploma and a bachelor's degree before, you know, colleges were taken out of prison, but I had got a bachelor's degree. And when I went home and told my family, my older brother said it didn't count because I got it in prison, right? And I was kind of bugged out about it, but, you know, I kept it to myself. I didn't say nothing because, I mean, he was the standard of success in our family. I had like 6 siblings, and my oldest brother was like the standard of success. And my goal while I was incarcerated was to come out and prove to the family that I wasn't, you know, a problem for the family. You know, I've done some things that, you know, to show the family that, you know, I was somebody, you know, that changed my life, and I changed my life to prove that to them. But when he told me that me getting a degree in college didn't matter because it was done in prison, you know, sort of like made me feel like it didn't matter. Sort of like it made me feel like, even though my degree said Syracuse University, it didn't say nothing about prison. It said, you know, Syracuse University. And I felt, you know, sort of disempowered. So, you know, it is important that language and how we use language to elevate and empower people, or we can use it to denigrate or disempower and further oppress people. So language in and of itself has the power to do that. And I think when Ellie Ellis quoted the Bible when he said death and life are in the power of the tongue. You know, he was talking about language and how language can shape individuals and make individuals and help humanize individuals that have been dehumanized coming from prisons and jails in our society. All right, I wanna bring up another question that was asked. I haven't looked in the chat, so somebody.
Someone had a question about motivational interviewing that I can take, but we can also table that for now.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'll try to be super quick about this because it's a little complicated. So motivational interviewing is when you literally, as the interviewer, remove yourself from the situation and solely base the interview on the participant or the individual that you're interviewing. So the first step of that looks like expressing empathy for your client. So empathy looks like, I'm so sorry that this is happening to you. How can I assist you? Empathy does not look like, well, you know, that happened to me once and, you know, it was really hard. That is sympathizing. And when you sympathize with a client, you're taking away their importance of their situation and you're inserting yourself. So when you empathize with someone, it's very different. A lot of people think that when you give someone pity or sympathy, it's the same thing as empathizing with them. It's not. You're not approaching this person and feeling bad for them. You are like, man, this situation really sucks. It's different. So we've been talking a lot about how language can be used for bad. This is how language can be used for good. You're not placing them in a situation. You're following what they're saying. If they're saying, I struggle with drugs, then it's like, oh, wow. Okay. So like, what are some of the circumstances surrounding that? And then the empathy part is when they start talking about their family and you actively listen. And you start, you know, asking them about what they're going through so they can actually talk about it and actually feel like, oh, like sometimes we just need to like emotionally discharge. And a lot of people that experience substance use disorder are emotionally discharging with their substances, the substances that they consume. So, you know, expressing empathy for the situation that they're in is going to help bring them closer to you because then they're going to know, oh, wow, this person actually cares. So again, the important first part of that step is to not insert yourself. The second step, and this is a really, really delicate balance, is to develop a discrepancy between their goals and what they're doing. What I mean specifically is you have to show them that they say that they want to free themselves from addiction, but the actions they're taking currently are not assisting them in their particular behavior. The reason I say this is so careful is because if someone is, you know, lacking economic security, it's really hard to tell someone, hey, stop using drugs when they're experiencing homelessness. Also, you have to take into consideration, you know, are there familial issues? Is this individual experiencing racism daily? Is this individual experiencing homophobia daily? So you have to create this image of like, this is where you want to be. So if you want to get there, you have to do this, but you're not telling them to do that. You're only showing them the way they have to go. You don't lead a horse to water and make it drink, right? You gotta show the horse where the lake is. This is the part where you're showing the horse where the lake is. It's that, okay, so let's review some of, like, let's take an inventory of some of the actions you're taking. And this is motivational because the person can sit down and then start to see the facets of their life that are wrong. And you can give them strategies and interventions that can actually help them correct those. So then that motivates the individual to make positive changes because they actually can see where they can make positive changes and might reduce their use or behaviors that you might be trying to change. You do not want to argument with them. You do not want to have an argument with them ever. Direct confrontation, never. Like, and that's why I say the previous point is a little bit of a slippery slope, because if you're trying not to argue with someone, but you're also trying to point out some things that they might be doing wrong, you have to be very careful with how you're showing this person, because you're not criticizing them, right? You're helping them make an inventory of their life and critique it themselves, right? They're looking at their own life and they're saying, okay, well, this is what I'm doing wrong and this is what I need to fix. You're not telling them that. If you're telling them that, you are not doing motivational interviewing. The interview is now about the provider. So I want to really harp on this point that if you argue with your patient or client that is telling you something and you directly confront them on this, you are going to alienate them. You're going to make them feel bad, and they're not going to feel motivated to do whatever you want them to do. The next point kind of falls into it, which is roll with the client resistance instead of fighting it. If a client does not want to tell you something, or a patient feels uncomfortable disclosing something to you, guess what? That's their right. Because unfortunately, in this country, we have the right to freedom of speech and against self-incrimination. And if someone feels like that information can be incriminating or could be damaging for the experience that they're having with you as a provider, unfortunately, you have no right to ask for that information. And actually prying and asking patients or clients for specific information that they do not feel comfortable disclosing is another great way to not be a motivational interviewer. And the last part, which is very, very, very important, is to support the client's ability to see themselves improving. So what that looks like is, you know, when someone says like, I don't think I can do this, like I've just been doing drugs for too long, you tell them it's never too late. You know, so many other folks like you have gone through this and I've treated them, and again, that's different than sympathy, right? Because I'm not inserting myself. I'm saying as a provider, I've seen this happen. You can do it too. I believe in you. That is the key to the motivational interview. The other 4 steps before, those are things for you to check on yourself. But really the point of a motivational interview is to get to the point where someone's like, you know what? I know that it might not be today. I know that it might not be tomorrow. Maybe I have to start on Suboxone. Maybe I need to go from injecting drugs to smoking drugs. But little by little, that person is going to feel encouraged by the little changes they're making. And once you have a bunch of those little changes happening, you end up getting to a big change. That is what motivational interviewing is.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for that marvelous breakdown of motivational interviewing. And I also want to add that we also got to be very mindful of the power of language in the therapeutic setting as well. People got to be very aware of that. And one of the things that, you know, as a social worker, I've been a social worker for many years, is that I'm very aware of is the power dynamics, the ability to define people. And this is for you, Erica, as clients. To be able to call people clients is a very powerful thing to do, because what it does is it automatically, in a therapeutic setting, disempowers them. When you call them the client and I'm the, you know, the social worker. I'm the expert and you're not. Also, I want to say be aware in the therapeutic setting of pathologizing people. We oftentimes pathologize people as clinicians. In other words, we define them according to and I heard Denise speak about it, the DSM-4 or the DSM-5 or whatever you want to call it. It pathologizes people to the point, right? It defines them as a disease. And we tend to look at people, we tend to fill out forms, and we tend to write on paper and on forms about people in terms of their pathology, so-called pathology that we're given. And sometimes people may have just woke up in a bad mood, but you know, they go see their therapist or they go see their psychiatrist or whatever, and they're put down as being depressed. And it may have just been, you know, I had a bad day today. I got on the train and it was delayed and I got down here late, and so let's just be mindful of language when we use language as professionals too. That's my point. Like when we use it as professionals.
I'm sorry. And I'm not trying to defend myself here. If people really think the word client is wrong, that's fine. But a clientele, by definition, is a group of people seeking a service from an individual. So when I refer to people as clients, I'm referring to them that way. So I don't refer to them as individuals experiencing homelessness or individuals seeking syringes, because it anonymizes the service that they're trying to acquire, and it actually gives them legal coverage. So I apologize if the word client is stigmatizing to people, but for my clients at least, and I'm going to use the word again, they're like, oh, I see Miss Jessica for my services. I am her client. So they feel like they're actually entering a business setting and doing something normal instead of being alienated. So I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out there, because to me, client is someone seeking services. So I am a service provider. I have clientele.
Okay. All right. We want to move to another question that was posed to us. Let me get it again. All right. So it's, what changes in our language can we make to avoid labeling people? What changes in our language can we make to avoid labeling people? Right? And I think we've all touched on that, but I just want to add, if we start with people first, language, it's one of the ways that I correct myself. And it's just how I correct myself, that before I speak, I always try to put people first, person first, and then whatever the issues are that they are challenged with or that they're dealing with comes after. So a person first who's dealing with the issues of trying to find an apartment, as opposed to the homeless person, but the person that's seeking, an apartment, or people who have experienced incarceration, people who have experienced domestic violence. Let's just try to always put the people first. Anybody else want to make a comment about that?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. Someone put in the chat about language needing to be changed and not wanting to be referred to as a consumer. And in the behavioral health community and mental health and substance use community, especially in the mental health community, the word consumer was an improvement from being called patient. And one of the things that we use now is we just refer to people in recovery. I'm not a behavioral health consumer or a mental health consumer. I am a person in recovery, and I work in peer support. And so in peer support, we are people who are in recovery from mental health and substance use issues. And when we work with our peers, because we are not clinicians, and even though we provide a service, the service of peer support, we don't use the term client or patient, because we are peers and we have that similar experience of having been a client or patient somewhere else. And so we use the terms with each other, peer or person in recovery. And just making that kind of language change, and again, empowering oneself to request that language change. If you hear the word consumer, someone calls you consumer, say, I don't like that word. Call me X. And that's really how the use of going from patient, client to consumer to person in recovery has sort of evolved. Brianna?
Yeah, I think you bring up an important part. I think it's important to say that language is evolving. Language is going to continue to evolve. Like I'm somebody that identifies as a Black trans woman, and specifically speaking to my transness, I think about to the 60s and 50s, there was no language to describe who I was, and it's evolved from transvestite to gay to now trans woman. Also, when I physically transitioned, the whole pronouns thing wasn't a thing. That, you know, that's new language that I've had to adapt, and I think we will get far if we just as a collective understand that there's not a one size fits all approach to this, and that part of the awareness or a part of the knowledge is giving each other space to have these type of conversations, because one person might have a perspective with what language to use, and another one might have another perspective. But it's having the knowledge that before you make the assumption to just say whatever you feel comfortable with, that it needs to be precipitated by a conversation that we just can't assume. And that's okay to have these conversations so that we can understand where we all are coming from. And I don't think it's a neat answer that's going to be wrapped up in a bow, especially given that language is going to continue to evolve. But from my vantage point, it's important to create these space for us to have conversations so we can really appreciate each other's perspectives. And I really like the conversation between versus client versus consumer really is a demonstration of how we have to create these spaces in order to really understand what language is important and the reasons why it might be important given a different setting, given a different relationship between folks. But I just encourage people to continue to create that space amongst each other.
Right, and in the African American community, even the what we called ourselves have evolved. I was born in a time where African Americans were called colored. And before then, they were called Negroes. And before then, they were called other names. But we went from calling ourselves colored from the time I was born to Afro-Americans, to African Americans, to Black, right? We went as we evolved. So Bianna, you're right. Language does evolve. Language does grow as human beings evolve, and as we grow, our language continues to take on that form. And there are even words that seep into our language. And the first thing I thought when I had to take on this moderator's job when it was about language, I realized how insidious language can be as well. And what I mean that insidious, that it can seep into our vocabulary and it can seep into our life, and we won't even recognize it until the damage is done, right? So, you know, you're right. It's the evolution is evolving. It is also very insidious that we also always have to take time out and always have to question ourselves about how we are viewing the world and how we are articulating the world in our language, because it's now having an even more powerful effect. You know, when we walk around and when we talking and stuff about, and especially about people, especially when you're a person that have power, you know, it's very important in how we talk about ourselves. So I also got a couple of things I would like to ask people to comment on, and that's the idea about what are some ways that we can go about improving this, you know, language. And one of the things is we talked about is to be conscious of language and what you use. Another one is stop using terms to define people, like coming out of, and I emphasize this a lot, coming out of institutions, coming out of prisons and jails, calling them offenders, calling them ex-felons, calling them ex-prisoners or ex-inmates or ex-convicts. The reason why I'm talking about those so much, because those have a very damaging effect on how individuals not only come out, but how they engage, how they integrate back into society. And I'm a person that has spent like 15 years incarcerated and did my very best to rehabilitate myself while I was, despite the fact that, rehabilitation doesn't exist. I did my best to rehabilitate myself so that I can make my integration back into society a very productive and positive one. However, the labels of being someone who's done time, the labels that I was called, and the denial of jobs and the denial of licenses because of a felony conviction, mind you, is for possession of marijuana, right? I wasn't able to get a job when I got a master's degree in social work and I went to apply for my license to do the type of work that, I want to do. I was told that because I have a felony conviction that I couldn't get a license to be a social worker. I couldn't get a license to be a KSAC counselor. I couldn't get a license to even be a peer counselor because I had a prior felony conviction. And it took some fighting on my part. It took some fighting because, I wasn't going to just fall back and not let this happen to me. But the most devastating thing was the social work profession actually denied me a license after I graduated, after I got my MSW, after I was graduated as the social work student of the year by the National Association of Social Work. When I went to apply for the license, I was told because I'm an ex-offender, I couldn't get the license. And that was very devastating, and it stayed with me for a little while. And I want to emphasize that when you're dealing with individuals who are coming out of prisons and jails, and they're coming into your environment, or they come to you for services, or you meet them in the community, they're assigned to your caseload. Be just mindful of that kind of interaction because that's something that people are dealing with. I don't know if Bruce is still there. Bruce, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Because that was something that you wrote about, Bruce, and something that is in your videos. And I just wanted to bring that up, how you dealt with that. Actually, Bruce talked about in his video that he was originally sentenced, I think it's there, correct me, Bruce, you was originally sentenced to 4 years and it turned into 8 years in prison?
Yeah, it was originally sentenced to 4.
Yeah, well,
yes, I was originally sentenced to 4 and I got 8 years for possession of crack cocaine, which I thought was very harsh sentencing for me. Again, this stigma, for people like me who goes to prison, for, I can understand, when we go to prison, we lose our humanity, our rights are taken from us. We go into the correction system. There's no compassion. We're not looked at as human beings anymore. We're not looked at as people anymore. And the thing about it is that I just, and I see that we're going to have to continue to fight this. This stigma 2021, we're going to have to do it in 2022, in 2023, because it's going to be an ongoing thing, I mean, and it's just people like us who are continuing to fight this to get.
We lost you, Bruce.
Okay, I got you. So what I'm saying is, we need to continue to band together, to continue to do these conferences next year, the year after, because this stigma is not going to be removed that easily. There's just society is just going to continue to put these labels on people who are in prison that come out. We go in prison, we get convicted, we become convicts, criminals, I was called crackheads in prison. I was called a low life in prison. I was called, you ain't gonna, you need to just die in here. You're just a waste of time. You're never gonna be nothing. And these are the things that I heard as growing up as a kid, when I was a special ed and being teased by people called slow boy, because being labeled, I have a learning disability. You can't remember this. You're not gonna never get out of special ed. These words I expressed in my videos are very damaging. It can cause severe emotional behaviors to where I reacted off of this, to where I believed that I was these things. And so I reacted to these things, you know? So I didn't continue to push forward in life to become a better person. I let society tell me that this is who you are, this is who you're gonna be, and that's just the end of it. But they were wrong. They were wrong. You know, I came through Ritual for Return, and I was able to undo all of that mess. The mask making that I make in my videos, those masks, when you put those strips on and you label each one, when the mask is completed, it's a very ugly mask, you know? And I say to myself in the video, how do you like this mask, society? Would you like for me to walk down the street with this mask? Of course you wouldn't. It would scare you. You would think, yes, you are that criminal. But this is the mask that society has given me. But thank God, you know, that, you know, I was able to, you know, get into Ritual for Return, you know, and open my feelings up and was able to learn new things about myself, you know? And I just think that we need to continue as a community, as people who are against people who label us, who put us down, who look down on us, who doesn't, you know, they just like wipe us off the face of the earth. We need to continue to fight this stigma because it's very damaging, you know. Ritual for Return, it's an arts justice program, you know, that uses community theater and space to create to perform rituals, you know, such as rites of passages. You know, we support transformation, you know, from prison back to society. We believe that community rites of passages have great potential to restore civic identities and contribute to the healing and transformation processing people who were incarcerated. You know, we believe in restoring those who come out of prison back to giving them their humanity back, giving them their rights back. You know, letting them know that they are somebody, that they're no longer a criminal. You know, this is what they labeled you as, but this is not who you are. I wasn't born and came out of my mother's womb and said I want to be called these names. They're hurt, they're damaging, they destroy, you know, and I just want to just express that, you know, that me as a person who's been sexually abused, you know, who's been beaten because, you know, I tried to tell my mother that this guy was sexually abusing me and she didn't believe me, you know, who was outcast, who was looked at as a person who just, you know, in special ed that was just in a class with 6 people and the kids would just laugh and just call us dummies and slow boys. And, you know, I went through a lot, you know, growing up, you know, and I was able to express my feelings and open up and do certain things that I never knew I could do by coming into Ritual for Return. It's a unique program. The system does not have these programs set up for people who come out of prison. Ritual for Return is the only program that I know of that exists today that can help individuals, you know, restore themselves to become productive members of society and loosen those labels, just get rid of them once and for all, and to continue to band together with people like us, you know, HIV, you know, people who are fighting stigma for transgenders, you know, all of us to continue to band together as one and to let society know that we're not going to tolerate these names, these labels, the things that you call us. It just cannot happen anymore, you know? And we need to do it again in 2022, 2023, 2024, wherever it takes, until, you know, until, you know, society understands that, listen, this is not right. That's all I have to say regardless. I'm getting all heated up in here and stuff like that. But yeah. I just wanted to say, listen, it's a great event. You know, I love working for Ritual for Return. You know, I am a co-founder. I'm a cohort facilitator, and I express, You know, we do our rights.
You sound like an executive director, Bruce. You sound like an executive director, brother.
Well, hey, listen. But yeah, I just think that we should just continue to fight this fight, because that's exactly what it is. You know, it's a fight to remove these name calling, these stigmas, these wrong name, these labels that are just causing, you know, people like me, you know, it harms, it hurts. It brings tears to my eyes, you know, to be looked at as when I go to get a job. You can't come in here. You can't hire you. Why? Because you have a criminal record for selling crack cocaine or for possessing crack cocaine. You know, oh, you're on medication, so we can't take you because you're diagnosed with schizophrenia, or you have too much depression going on in your life. You know, oh, we can't take you because, you know, you have a history of going to rehabilitation centers and history of, you know, you can't stop doing drugs, you know, or your diagnosis is too strong, or we can't allow, you know, the HIV patients and with the normal patients, and, you know, all this craziness, you know, it just has to stop. You know, and I'm just honored to be a part of this conference, and, you know, I want to make a difference. You know, I want to help change somebody's life. I want to share my story with individuals so that I can help them bring theirs out, and then for them not to be ashamed of who they are or what they went through, you know, because listen, nobody's perfect in this world. We've all had our ups and downs, you know, we all went through our ins and outs, you know, we have our decisions, we make our bed, we lie in it, we learn from it, we move on, but we do not deserve to continue to be called all these nasty names. It's unfair, it's not right, and me, for one, I will not stand for it.
Wow, thank you so much. Anybody else want to comment on that? And
Wow, quiet.
we have some comments in the chat.
And we have 8 minutes left.
And we have 8 minutes left. Anybody want to close us out with a Jessica? Can you please close us out? I know you got some more to share with us.
Well, so in the chat, someone was asking about like college students, and this is a really complicated thing, and I don't want to waste too much time on this because there's another important question about meth. But I'll just say very quickly that like we all have access to the internet. We all have a responsibility to learn how we can treat other people better. And the example that I put in the chat was just one example. I was on the student government. I helped remove that sorority from campus because I was like, oh, hell no, we ain't gonna let these girls stay. And the reason for that is because I, as a Latinx person, know that referring to Black people with that name is incredibly, incredibly racist. And nobody taught me that besides my Black friends that I actually had growing up. So, you know, if we took the time to actually like learn from other people, like actually go on YouTube, go on Google, you know what I mean? If you're a professor and you got kids that are stigmatizing other kids, we got YouTube, we got Google. There's no excuse as to why someone should not know why something is ignorant or wrong for someone. And if they're penalized for it, well, they should have thought about it before they said it. You know, there are things that I can't say right now in this conference. Not that I really have things that I like, other things I want to say, you know, I'm on topic, but like, you know, I couldn't talk about inappropriate things here. None of my colleagues on here could either, right? So, you know, there's a time and a place for everything. And I think that actually can go into a closing point, which is we all have the responsibility to be better people. You know, years ago, I was a like drug user doing sex work, kind of, you know, messing up in school and stuff. And now I have a job where I can actually help people who have experienced the things that I have experienced. You know, I think we could be doing a lot more for people with ADHD and meth because that is a huge problem in our country. And I just want to note that methamphetamine deaths, like overdose deaths, have increased by 50% in every single state in the nation. So that is a really pressing issue that we don't have a lot of time to talk about. But what I can tell you is that a lot of my clients, what they talk about is the stigma. They don't like being called a tweaker. They don't like being called an addict. When you call them those things, they just think that's what they are. And for years, when I was told that I was a tweaker, I was a drug addict, that's what I thought I was. I thought that I was someone who did not deserve love, who could not be in a relationship, who could not get her stuff together. And that's because other people told me those things. So let's remember that our words are powerful, and that when you attribute something to someone, they might just believe it.
And that those words that we could attribute to ourselves, that those words that we hear, that we take on, can change us on a very basic level. So that we need to speak more positively to ourselves. You know, we're going to hear the crap from the outside, but not internalizing that stigma and taking on those negative languages and understanding that we are people first, that we are children of the universe, and that we each have a right to be here, and we are blessed to be here, and that self-love. And don't forget, February 13th, International Self-Love Day is coming up. Remember that we can advocate for ourselves and demand that respect, to be treated as equal humans on this planet.
Yana, you want to shut us out? Like, we got a couple of more minutes. I know, you can shut us out with something really powerful that we can remember.
I wasn't planning on ending us out, but I can, if anybody, folks should leave from this conversation. I think the biggest thing is that you shouldn't assume, and that you shouldn't assume, and that you should be inspired to have conversations with folks, because people are the masters of their own experience. And if you just talk to people, if you just create space for people, then you will know. You will know, you will be aware, and you won't offend. And I think it's as simple as that. Just, again, creating that space for that dialogue, for that discussion, really interrogating where these words come from, what do they mean? Are they giving power to people, or are they taking power away from people? Who created this word? Why do we know these words? Why do we use these words? And I think, given we live in a society where it's rewarded to conform, that we are chastised for thinking, or for questioning, or for pushing back. But we need to start doing that, because it ultimately we want to save lives. If we're able to include people, if we're able to make people feel seen and feel respected, then we are ultimately saving lives. And at the end of the day, that's something that I care about. I'm sure the folks on this panel care about that. And again, rehashing the theme of this conversation, effective and impactful language centers people. It centers the human experience. So I just think it's important that folks listening leave with that awareness.
Wow. Well, thank you all. I mean, it was a very powerful, especially for me, because this is the first time I ever moderated anything. So I'm very happy I was asked to do it, and I took on that challenge. Where a lot of things that we just don't do in life because we were told that we couldn't do it. We were told that we weren't good enough to do it. And, this is just one of those things where, I did something that, I didn't think I would be able to do. So I'm even more empowered. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bruce. Sorry for your technical problems. We'll get that fixed as soon as we can. Love to
You're
see
welcome.
you. Yeah, love to see you, brother. Denise, that's it.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Yeah, thank
You're
you,
welcome.
everyone.
Language
You're
matters,
welcome.
people matter.
Language matters, people matter. I sent everybody Ellis' letter Read that letter, pass it around. Thanksgiving is coming up, families come together. Talk to them about what we had this discussion about. Let them know that it matters, because that's where it can start at. And everybody is great. Thank y'all so much.
All right, thank you.
And y'all have a good day.
Come on.
Thank you too, Zoom technician guy or woman.